to see you. For some reason, you have avoided being demonized by the NDP, even though I know you've worked for this and that outlet, you've worked for a variety of outlets. They still let you in, but they don't let in others. I don't know why. Maybe it's because you're friendly also, but so is Jonathan Bradley. So is Adam Sos. I don't know why they don't let those guys in. Is there any rhyme or reason to who they let in their press conferences or not?
Yeah, so we've been talking about this back at my workplace. We've been kind of bouncing around a couple theories because it is very interesting and we're not 100% sure what's going on either. Interestingly, the Alberta NDP actually don't take my media requests. So up until the election campaign, if I was to shoot them an email saying, hey, can you respond to this? I wouldn't get a response back. Once I joined True North, they said to me, we actually don't have dealings with True North, and that is a policy of the provincial party here in Alberta. So now they're in a situation where I'm showing up at all these press conferences along with a host of other independent journalists, and they have to decide what it is they're going to do with me. So at my very first press conference I went to with them last week, they just simply decided that once they got to the end of the mainstream media reporters in the room, they were going to take questions from the phone. And I didn't like that very much. I had driven all the way to the press conference and I hadn't gotten any questions in a very long time. So I did what any good reporter would do, and I just kind of yelled my question out. It was a pretty small room. They were, of course, broadcasting their press conference. They couldn't really avoid it. And to her credit, Rachel Notley did answer my question, and then I proceeded with a follow-up. And so at that point, maybe they decided it was just going to be easier for them to let me ask questions. I'm not sure what the thinking was there. One of my colleagues, Andrew Lawton, suggested that perhaps they want to allow True North to ask questions because then they can't be seen as, well, they're just completely barring all conservative media outlets. It's just simply maybe they are barring some that they consider too fringe, and they can kind of argue with that by allowing us to ask questions. So there's a couple working theories there. We don't have an exact answer. And even now, when I go to the press conferences, I'm always kind of like, am I going to get a question in today? But the last two I've been to, they've actually handed me the mic to ask my question. So it certainly seems like kind of an up in the air policy. Seems like they're making it up as they go.
Yeah, it's unusual. Now, you asked a good question, if I recall, because I think we showed the clip the other day. You asked if they had any culpability for the fact that Rachel Notley tweeted out the location of Danielle Smith's press conference that was stormed by two NDP activists. And I thought it was a good question. The answer was absurd and comical. Oh, we do that all the time. Here, take a look at that exchange that Rachel was just talking about.
Rachel, Emmanuel with True North. I wanted to ask you about the protesters that interrupted Danielle Smith's press conference today. I know that after it happened, the Alberta NDP issued a tweet saying they condemned the protests. Elections is about time of reading voters. However, prior to that event, the Alberta NDP had also tweeted the location of Danielle Smith's They had also tweeted Danielle Smith's location and where her event would be. Do you have any regrets about doing that? Do you think that was a mistake and actually might have led to the protest occurring?
No, because my understanding is that the UCP had also tweeted the location of the press conference, and that's actually where we got the information from. So it's quite common for press events to be described publicly about where they are. But let me say that once again, I don't support that kind of intervention in a public event that's designed to deliver a message to voters. Whether you agree or don't agree, our elections and our democratic process is sacred, and people need to be able to speak to voters without fear of intimidation or any kinds of threats like that. So I definitely do not support or endorse what happened.
Well, let's come to yesterday, because it was an event that Cian Bexley says was an open invitation to all journalists. Now, they didn't let Rebel News in, or maybe Adam didn't try and get in. Cian went in, and you caught this exchange between Cian and an NDP organizer. And I'll give Cian credit. He kept his energy low. He wasn't rude. He didn't swear. And he actually told the NDP organizer what his question was in advance, which frankly, I don't recommend that. You want to have the element of surprise. You want to but that just shows how compliant he was. He was proving it wasn't a gotcha question or an attack question. It was a legit question about police funding. Why don't you set the scene for us, and we'll play the video of the interaction between Cian Bexley and this NDP organizer before he got the bum's rush. Tell us, set it up, the clip.
Sure. So yesterday was a very exciting, a very busy day on the Alberta election campaign trail. A bunch of us were at Danielle Smith's announcement, which was a big one for the province. And then we quickly rushed over to the NDP one, which was about 10 minutes away. I knew Cian was coming. They were manning the door at the small private business in Calgary called Madam Premier. They were unlocking the door and letting people in as they showed up, probably to avoid people that they didn't want coming in. So when there was maybe a break in them, they had left the door unlocked. Cian kind of slipped in just moments before the press conference was supposed to start. And I was actually talking to Jonathan Bradley at the time, and the room just went dead silent. It was so awkward. And he walks in and he kind of slips into the back, and he's just standing there behind the cameras, not making a noise, not causing a disturbance in any way. And sure enough, a couple minutes later, an NDP staffer approaches him, and then their hired security approaches him. And that's sort of when the dispute began. And they were like, "We're asking you to leave." And he's like, "Well, I'm here for the press conference. I would like to ask Notley a question, the former premier a question." And as you mentioned, he even went as far as to say, "This is what my question is going to be. It's a very reasonable question, and I want an answer on it." And then the business owner came up to him and said, "Will you leave?" And he wouldn't leave. He stood his ground. Good for him. And eventually they actually called the police to get him out of there.
Here, let's watch. And the reason I want to show this is to show the demeanor. What a contrast with the storming of Danielle Smith's campaign announcement, shouting, blocking, disrupting, grabbing the mic, physically shoving police, physically shoving security. Here's Cian, low energy, just saying, "No, I'm just here for the press conference. Take a look at this." I won't play the whole thing, but I'll play enough that you'll get a feeling for it. Take a look.
The bottom line is I understand that you press conference will not take place in wrong meeting. So this press conference will not take place for the 7 minutes score. So we'll ask you the question you say. Sure. Just ask me the question. I'll do what I can. I can't guarantee what I do. Give me a question.
But half dozen of the candidates have supported anti-police rhetoric, including active on both.
Okay.
They've supported it and in practice done it. And now that the new Janet Brown poll has come out saying that over 50% of Albertans are supporting Danielle Smith, that's a leaked poll that just came out.
Okay.
Does she think it's time to either discipline those candidates or retort the anti-police message?
Okay. You've got that as well, Mike.
Yeah, appreciate that.
I'll
be curious to hear the response to that.
Okay, we'll get a response back to you soon.
Well, I'll be right here.
No, we're going to ask you before you leave.
No, I'm just going to wait here for the premier.
press conference will not start while you're here.
I guess it's not happening.
It may not happen if you're going to stay here, sir. I'm not going to pull you out of here. I'm not going to put hands on you, sir. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to ask you politely again, as per Mike, to leave the premises.
Don't you think that it's embarrassing that the ex-premier can't answer? Like, that question was reasonable, was it not?
That could be your opinion. I'm not going to share that opinion right now.
Okay, that's fine, but it's my opinion is this is embarrassing for her. And I think that Albertans will see this. They'll see this behavior as totally wrong.
You're
Socialist, communist behavior.
You're definitely telling your opinions.
Now, I want to say that our rule of thumb is that we stand our ground, but if we are on private property, we respect private property enough that if the landlord or owner says, "Get off of my property," we comply. Now, we don't race to comply. We comply at a reasonable pace, but if it's someone's private place, we leave. That's the Rebel News way. It's a little bit different when it's in a public place, like a city hall, when the rules are different. But in a sense, if it's a private business owner saying to Cian Bexley, "Get out," however unfair that is, that's the moment where a Rebel News journalist would get out. But I think Cian, and perhaps he was right on this one, wanted to see would the NDP call the cops on him like they did with Anne McGrath. And the answer is, you bet they would. These are socialist tyrants. These are authoritarians. They have no compunction calling the police. They would call the police every day if they could. That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. We rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.